So Disney's Dumbo, their latest in their series of animated films that are now being adapted into live action. Tim Burton's Dumbo. Now, for some people, they might be thinking like, "Oh, wait a minute, Tim Burton's Dumbo, the same Tim Burton that we're talking about here." But think about this in context for a minute, okay? Tim Burton mostly does films about outcast characters. And Dumbo is certainly an outcast character. You know, it's a baby elephant with giant ears that don't really seem normal. And people laugh at him, kind of call him a freak, except he's capable of so much more, as we've seen in the animated film. And now, of course, you know, with a lot of these, you know, animation live action adaptations, especially Disney classics that have, you know, that deal with animals, of course, the big question arises of, you know, are the animals going to talk? Because, yeah, Dumbo didn't talk, but, you know, the crows talked, the storks talked, the mice talked. But no animals talk in this film. And since no animals talk, that means we've got to have, you know, some human characters who've got to come into play here. So we bring in the Farrier family, who kind of have to fill in like the human portion of this story of Dumbo coming to his full potential and getting reunited with his family. Because his mother is eventually taken away. So we deal with the Farrier family, who they've lost their mother. There are two kids in the family, and their names are... I knew I was going to forget them. Millie and Joe. Now, they had to be watched by the circus people because their father, Holt, who's played by Colin Farrell, went off to war, and he comes back home and he doesn't have an arm. Which might make, you know, riding horses in the circus a little bit tricky, but he still feels like he's up to the challenge. And fortunately, the man running the circus, Max Medici, who's played by Danny DeVito, is willing to take him back in. I mean, like DeVito here, he's his usual kind of, you know, cantankerous self, who's always, you know, always blustering and always frustrated and always constantly yelling, you know, that typical DeVito that we love to see every now and then. He's a bit of a swindler, as you might expect, you know, especially after It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. But he's willing to take Holt back. Not only is he willing to take him back, but he's also willing to make an investment in a pregnant elephant, the elephant Jumbo, who will, of course, give birth to Dumbo. And, of course, when Dumbo comes out, he's got the big ears, and he's not, you know, Max isn't quite sure what to do with him. So, you know, and, you know, if you've seen the animated film, you know, you pretty much know what happens next from here. Until you get to the third act, and then we kind of mix it up a little bit here. Because we gotta have a villain for the picture, and we've got a good one. We've got Michael Keaton back as this kind of like theme park owner of this very bizarre theme park that is so very Tim Burton, who basically wants Dumbo for his big act. And of course, we know that he's got some evil plans here, mostly because Michael Keaton is just getting nuts in this role. Like, really, like, I'm sure you've seen Michael Keaton, you know, he's gotten, you know, let's get nuts, that type of Michael Keaton. We've seen him in a few films like that, you know, Spider-Man Homecoming, he was great in as a crazy guy. Here, he's some kind of, like, weird unhinged, where it's strange to, like, well, first it's strange to, like, look at him with, like, kind of like that crazy hairdo he's got, but then you're trying to figure out if he's got, like, an accent, maybe a little bit of one in there. And of course, like, he plays it up a little bit too cartoonish, but, you know, I kind of enjoyed some aspects of it. It kind of did take me out of the film every now and then, though. One of the biggest problems I think that this film has, that a lot of Disney films that are based on their animated classics are having, is that there's a lot of scenes that try to replicate the original that don't do a very good job. There's something in animation that makes them much more memorable and carry more emotion. Like, the perfect example is, like, for most people who have seen Dumbo, the original, they know that one of the most emotional scenes in that film is the baby mine sequence. And this is the sequence where Dumbo's mother is locked up in a cage, and Dumbo can't get to her, but she can get out her trunk, and it can come through, like, her cage, and it can, like, you know, cuddle Dumbo while the Baby Mine song plays, and kind of, like, sways him back and forth, and then, like, you know, the big tears come out as this very somber song is playing. And it's a very somber and tearful moment. Now, that same moment is in Tim Burton's Dumbo, but there isn't much of a lead up to it, and the song occurs, like, fairly early in the film, that we don't get, that you don't quite feel that same, like, emotional tug. And I almost wonder if it's because, like, is it because, like, it's so early in the film, or is it because, like, Dumbo has such, like sort of realistic proportions where we don't get, like, kind of like, like the big eyes and, of course, the large tears that would come out of Dumbo in the animated film that brought out bigger tears, frankly. It feels, and I think this is, like, a big problem through most of the film, is that it always feels like Dumbo is more interesting as the concept than an actual character. Like, of course, now this isn't to say that, Dumbo isn't interesting to watch. Naturally, that first moment where he flies around the ring, you got that Danny Elfman score going. You've got some great shots. You've got this real sense of whimsy and magic. It's there. It's there. But it always feels like it's like Dumbo's just like a kind of like a part of almost like the background, because we spend more time with the Farrier family, and maybe it's just because they get, more dialogue, so we got to concentrate on them more. But it always felt like Dumbo should be more of the star here. Like, in fact, by the time we get to the third act, we almost, like, completely lose sight of Dumbo, because now it's all inside this theme park by Michael Keaton's character, and the theme park is just it's like Burton production, Wonderland. You've got all these crazy different costumes, like stuff that looks like it was left over from Batman Returns. You have all these different, like, crazy rides and like huge big tops and all these great circus acts. And then you've got, like, what is easily Burton's favorite part of the park, which is like the kind of like castle of spooky animals, and it's got great, bold lighting, and it's got shadows and fog and scary creatures in the darkness, and it's like, and you don't get to see much of Dumbo in this sequence, but you're just kind of like, that's kind of Burton for you. And I think that's, like, my main criticism of the film, is that I like it more as a Tim Burton film for kind of what Tim Burton does with, like, the way he shoots stuff and the way he stages this world, rather than how he portrays Dumbo. Because it kind of just feels like Dumbo is just going through the motions of what he did in the animated film, even though it is kind of fun to watch Ava Green play a trapeze artist who gets to ride around on Dumbo. That's kind of fun. And there is, like, of course, they staged the Farrier family to be like a parallel with Dumbo, because, they've lost their mother, and they have, Holt is missing an arm, so he's disfigured too. So they kind of relate in those aspects. But there are so many elements that just keep taking you out of the film. Another aspect too is, like, they replicate the you might remember the pink elephant sequence from the original animated film. It's in here too, but of course, since they can't have Dumbo get drunk in this day and age, it kind of loses a little bit of that surreal allure there. In fact, like, I can tell, like, Burton would love to do this sequence because it's meant to be a little bit scary. And Burton does bring a certain amount of creepiness to it, but only, like, just enough that it feels like a little bit more surreal than it is as trippy as it could have been. Like, it's not even like a hallucination. It looks like there's some kind of, like, weird science they did to make, like, the pink elephants real. And Danny DeVito's character just kind of looks at it, it's like, oh, that's a little odd. Not too odd compared to everything else we've seen, but, there you go. Another element that took me out of the film too is Michael Buffer, who you might know as, like, a wrestling announcer. He plays a ringmaster in here at one point, and when he shows up in the middle of the ring, I was just like, oh, no, don't say the line, don't. And then he says it. He says, let's get ready for Dumbo! And I was taken out of the movie again, because I think that's my biggest problem with the film, is like there's a lot of great sequences in here. Burton's got amazing production designs. I love those elements of whimsy and magic that he's got going on here. But like I said, there's always, like, either a scene that's replicated, or Keaton going a little bit too nutty, or you have Michael Buffer coming in there and doing that voice, and it kept taking me out of the film. I got frustrated with it. And then you have I mean, it's not to say that I don't appreciate Keaton, but it feels like he's almost kind of like in a different film here. It almost feels like he's trying to out crazy Alan Arkin, who's playing this ridiculous banker who's expected to say even more ridiculous stuff than Keaton will. So it almost kind of feels like they're in competition to see who's the more crazy rich guy, I guess. And of course, like, I do got to mention this one thing too. Is like yeah, I mentioned how kind of like Dumbo's design seems a little bit weird. I kind of got used to it after a while. I just wish there was more expressiveness to him, even though I feel I could feel a little bit of emotion from here and there, but I didn't quite feel it was all there. Maybe it's just because the eyes were too small. I feel like he's already got big ears. Can he have, you know, a little bit bigger eyes too? Or were they afraid it was gonna look too much like Alita Battle Angel? Just because like when I think like where the realness really hurts the film with Dumbo's design is when they show him in the clown makeup, and when you have like an elephant with all those wrinkles and then the clown makeup, of course you look at that and everyone thinks like, oh man, like Heath Ledger's Joker, or it's like, oh, Joaquin Phoenix looking pretty good as the Joker. So there were still elements that would take you out of the film like that. But for what it mostly tries to accomplish here, of trying to be kind of like a whimsical escape and kind of like a, you know, a big show of, you know, what Burton does best with how he stages stuff that's like scary and big and magical and wondrous. He gets most of that through here. It's just there's a few more of those like little live action adaptations of animated classics hang-ups that are still present here that I feel really hurts the film and pulls it back from being its own thing. Where it feels like it's being more a replication of the original Dumbo than it is its own thing. Because when it is embracing itself of like doing kind of its own stuff, with, you know, kind of like allowing Burton to do what he does best, the film actually works like really well. I think it just I think a lot of these and I mean Disney's going to keep doing these live action adaptations of their animated classics. I think they need to have more faith to not rely on on just staging the same scenes over, because like we've got all those scenes, we've got these animated classics. You can still go back and watch Dumbo. It still holds up. You know, we don't need these scenes directly replicated. You need to have faith in doing your own thing here. And I wish there was more of that. So for Dumbo, 2.5 out of 5 stars.